The genetic material of prokaryotic cells in a single chromosomes is made up of a single strand DNA. A critical protein, histone protein, that is found bound in the chromosomes of eukaryotes is absent in prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells also lack the nucleolus and the mitotic apparatus. The cell wall of prokaryotic cells is non-cellulosic and is made up of carbohydrates and lipids. Prokaryotic cells are asexual and thus, reproduce via asexual means without the formation of gametes. Eukaryotic cell. Eukaryotic cell has a true membrane-bound nucleus and has other membranous organelles that allow for compartmentalization of functions. Protozoa, fungi, plants, and animals all have eukaryotic cells. The characteristics of eukaryotic cells are: eukaryotic cells have the nucleus enclosed within the nuclear membrane. The cell has mitochondria. Flagella and cilia are the locomotory organs in eukaryotic cell. A cell wall is the outermost layer. The cells divide by a process called mitosis. Its cells contain a cytoskeletal structure. The nucleus contains a single, linear DNA, which carries all the genetic information. A comparison of a prokaryotic cell and typical animal eukaryotic cell.
There are almost 200 different types of cells that can be distinguished within the human body. And all of these cells have their own cell shape, their own cell size, their own lifespan, and their own job to do. Now, this bewildering variety of cells in the human body presents us with kind of a problem. If there's so many cells to look at, how can we begin to understand what they all do and how they function? Well, fortunately for us, this problem is solved a little bit because you can group these cells into only 4 basic categories or tissues. The 4 divisions of the cells in the body are as follows. The first division is that of epithelial cells. Epithelial cells come in many different shapes and sizes, but they all are firmly attached to each other, and their job is to either line the interior of hollow organs, or else they can be piled up to form the surfaces of structures like the skin, or the interior of the mouth or the tongue, or other organs like the intestines. Another category of cells is that of nerve cells. Nerve cells are specialized for communication. They send signals between one part of the body and the other. So they allow the brain, for example, to control things like muscles and glands. They also allow the brain to receive sensory signals from organs like the skin. The third category of tissues is that of muscle cells. Muscle cells are specialized for contraction, and there are a number of different types of muscle cells, but their main job is to allow movement in the body. They can pull and tug on things like bones and ligaments. And finally, there's another category of cells called connective tissue cells. These cells provide structural strength to the body, and they also help us defend against invading organisms like bacteria. Now, in some parts of the body, all of these different categories of cells can be seen all at once. For example, here's a picture of a part of the body that shows all these 4 types of cell. In this picture of the human body, we can see epithelial cells. These particular type of epithelial cells have very flat, dark staining nuclei, and they line the interior of 2 types of blood vessels. One type of blood vessel seen here is a capillary. Capillaries are the smallest types of blood vessels, and they're made up of one single epithelial cell that are lined up into a long tube-shaped structure. These capillaries provide oxygen and nutrients to other tissues surrounding them. Another type of blood vessel seen here is a little bigger. This is called a venule. Here the blood cells have been washed out of the blood vessels, so we can't see them. Now, another category of cell that you can see in this picture is that of a nerve cell. Nerve cells are specialized to have a particular type of nucleus. All nerve cells in the body have a big, round, pale staining cell nucleus with a dark dot in the center. This dark dot is called a nucleolus. What is the job of the nucleolus? We'll talk about that in a subsequent video. Also, you can see that the cytoplasm of this nerve cell has tiny little small dark dots in them. What in the world are these tiny little dots? We'll talk about these structures when we talk about nerve cells in more detail. Another category of cells that you can see in this picture is that of striated muscle cells. These particular type of muscle cells look like very long pink cylinders. They have their own characteristic type of nucleus. Muscle cells have a pale blue cigar-shaped nucleus. So if you're looking at a pale blue cigar-shaped nucleus, it's a very good chance that you're looking at the nucleus of a muscle cell. You can also see stripes that march across the cytoplasm of these cells. What in the world are these stripes? We'll talk about these special structures of muscle cells in a later video. Finally, in this picture, you can see a fourth category of cells, and this category is that of connective tissue cells. Most of the cells in connective tissue have very flattened, dark staining nuclei, and you can see these cells right here, and here, and here. These connective tissue cells fill in the spaces in the body that are not otherwise occupied by nerve, muscle, or epithelium. And as I said, they provide structural strength to the body. In subsequent videos, we'll take a look at some of these cells in more detail and explore how they function.
Cell types. Cells in the human body number in trillions and come in all shapes and sizes. These tiny structures are the basic unit of all living organisms. Cells form tissues, tissues form organs, organs form organ systems, and organ systems work together in an organism. A type of cells in the human body based on tissue formation. Bone cells, osteocytes. They are the toughest body cell as they are bound together by calcium and phosphate. They give strength, support and framework to the body by enclosing organs and skeletal system.
Bone cells. Now there's 4 different types of cells that are found within bone tissue. First we have the osteogenic cells, and these are undifferentiated and they're going to develop into osteoblasts. Now we'll get into each of these cells a little bit more detail in just a little bit. But when the osteoblasts get trapped within the calcified matrix, in other words, they get trapped within the bone, their structure and their function changes, and they become mature osteoblasts, and at this point we call them osteocytes. Now, osteoclasts, they develop from monocytes and macrophages, and they differ in appearance from the other bone cells. Now, osteogenic cells, these are going to be the stem cells. As I mentioned, they're undifferentiated. When the time comes, if we need more osteoblasts, then they will differentiate into the osteoblasts. Now, here the osteoblasts are immature bone cells that secrete organic components of the matrix. In other words, osteoblasts make bone. And then osteocytes, which are the mature osteoblasts, they maintain the bone matrix and they live in little spaces called lacuna. If you remember when we looked at the osteon looked like it had little dished out areas with little legs on it. They looked like ants crawling all over the place. Those little dished out areas were the lacuna, and it's the osteocytes that live in the lacuna. And if you remember the cannuliculi, those little things that look like the legs coming off, as you can see on this osteocyte, it has little projections or appendages that go off into those cannuliculi. And then we have the osteoclasts. And as you can see, it's a weird looking little thing. It's a multinucleate cell, and it's going to secrete acid and enzymes. And basically what this does is it dissolves bone. It breaks bone down. To me, it looks like those little scrubbing bubble guys from the Scrubbing Bubbles commercials where you spray it on the bathtub and they go about stripping away all the minerals and everything. Well, that's exactly what the osteoclast does. As we need to remodel bone, or if we need to maintain our blood calcium levels, for instance, blood calcium level goes down, but we're not getting any calcium from the diet, or we're not absorbing it from anywhere else, and we need to maintain that blood calcium level. One of the ways that we can do that is to actually strip it out of the bone, strip that calcium out, put it into the bloodstream, and that would be the job of the osteoclast. Now, normally osteoclasts and osteoblasts kind of work together. So, as osteoclasts tear bone down, osteoblasts build bone up. Now, they usually maintain a pretty good balance. However, what if the osteoclasts are doing more work than the osteoblasts? What's going to happen? Okay, the osteoclasts are going to start stripping away a lot of bone. If we strip away more bone than we're adding, then we can develop a condition called osteoporosis, and which is very severe. It makes the bones brittle and the bones can break quite easily. Now, a lot of people, including myself when I was learning this, had a hard time remembering which made bone and which tore the bone down. Was it the osteoblasts that made bone, or did it tear it down? Was it the osteoclasts? And me, I'm a guy, so when I hear blast, well, what I'm thinking of is explosion and breaking things apart. And, well, get that out of your head, okay? Because that's not the case. Blasts make things, and the osteoblasts make bones. The osteoclasts tear the bone down. And, well, here's a little way that might help you learn it. And so I walk up to this guy, and he's got a name tag on that says Osteoblast. And I'm like, well, hi, good to meet you, Mr. Osteoblast. So what do you do for a living? And then he tells me,
I make bone.
and I'm like, you make bone? Wow, that's pretty interesting. Do you like your job? And he says,
Are you kidding? I have a blast making bone.
and so there you go. Blasts have a blast making things.
Two, Coralid cells, chondrocytes. These cells are similar to bone cells, but the surrounding material is just loose and flexible compared to those of bone cells. Hence, they are freely bendable. They are present in your bone, in between large bones to help them bend and move freely, like in between two ribs, spinal bones, joints. 3. Nerve cells. These cells are very long and have many branching at either ends. Their specialty is they never multiply in one's lifetime. They are present all over the body and are sometimes as long as few meters long. They are human brain cells and are found in plenty in brain and the spinal cord and form the nervous tissue. 4. Epithelial cells. These cells are very simple cells which form covering of other cells. These cells form covering layers of all the organs and hence are set in skin, scalp, respiratory tract, in the buccal cavity surface among others. Having closely joined cells, they serve as barriers for pathogens, fluid loss and mechanical injuries. Example, skin cells, mucous cells. Epithelial cells differ in shape, some are cuboidal, others are thin and flat known as squamous, and the rest are tall and narrow called columnar. If they consist of single-layer cells, they are named simple epithelium. If they are made up of several cell layers, they are named stratified epithelium. 5. Muscle cells. These cells are muscle tissue, mostly long, large, and have ability to contract and relax, providing movements. There are 3 types. A. Skeletal muscle cells. Are attached to long bones and assist in their movement by muscle contraction. B. Cardiac muscle cells. Are present only in heart muscle and are responsible for heartbeats. C. Smooth muscle cells. Are flexible yet can contract and relax and are present in stomach, intestine, blood vessel walls, vascular tissue, helping in movement of food through the gut. Six. Secretory cells. They form glands and secrete something important. Example, pancreatic cells which secrete insulin, glucagon, salivary gland which secretes salivary amylase, sebaceous gland which secrete oil on the skin. They are found in all secretory organs. 7. Adipose cells. These are fat cells and are storage by nature to store fat. They are especially seen in the soles, palms, and bums. They reduce friction to the body. 8. Blood cells. These cells include RBCs, WBC, and thrombocytes, etc. They are always motile and never stay in one place. They have limited lifespan and they never multiply to form new cells. Instead, new cells are formed from other cells. B type of cells in human body based on their function. 1. Conductive cells. Nerve cells and muscle cells come under this category. They have internal ability to conduct an electric impulse from one region to other distant region in the body. 2. Connective cells. Bone cells, blood cells fall under this category. They help connect other cells and tissues. 3. Glandular cells. These cells are secretory cells. They form glands like pancreas, salivary glands and help in production of enzymes, hormones. 4. Storage cells. These are adipose cells. Some liver cells act to store materials like fat for later use. This fat is consumed in time of starvation and also in excess cold temperatures. 5. Supportive cells. These are the cells that act as support to adjacent cells. Example, glial cells in the brain and spinal cord help provide nourishment to the nerve cells and also protect them from shocks and trauma. 6. Special type of cells. These are specialized cells with important functions in the body. These are sperms. These cells, unlike others, are haploid. They are present only in the males after puberty. These cells have a tail which enables them to swim and move in the female uterus. They have enzyme, namely hyaluronidase, which helps them penetrate through uterine tissue and reach oocytes. B. Oocytes. Cells are haploid and present in adult female genital system. They are also haploid like sperms. They start to form after puberty and continue so till the age of menopause. They accept sperm cells to form zygote, which grows further in the uterus to form a baby. C. Stem cells. These are basic cells or parent cells which can differentiate into any cell based on the requirement. These stem cells in the human body are given so much importance due to their promising role in the treatment of disorders in the future. D. Rods and cones. These cells are in the eyes and have capacity to capture image, color and light. E. Ciliated cells. These cells are present as lining of respiratory tract and esophagus, and have a pointed thread, like cilia, which move in one particular direction to pass the material. F. Blood cells. These are quite interesting cells that never attach to one another. Blood cells freely flow in the liquid blood. Some of them are not alive, RBCs, while others have varied shapes like WBC, platelets, spindle shape. WBCs macrophages have ability to eat, gulp, any foreign particle like bacteria in the body. Hence, they are body defense cells.
When you think of the term specialized cell, what do you think of? Well, when I was younger, I used to imagine this super cell that was really important and did all of these special tasks. I don't know, like some kind of special agent cell. Yeah, I kind of had that wrong. A specialized cell is a cell that has a structure that suits its function. Many cells have really different functions, and so their structure can vary greatly. When you see a lot of pictures of plant cells and animal cells, you might start to think that this is how they all look. All the animal cells and all the plant cells, they might start to kind of look the same in diagrams. Well, plant cells and animal cells definitely have structures that are unique to them. We have that covered in our Intro to Cells video. But because cells have different functions, depending on their cell type and the activated genes that they have, cells are going to have different structures too. They're going to be specialized. Now, the process for cell differentiation, which really explains how cells become specialized, it's a topic for another one of our videos. This video is going to focus on examples of specialized cells so that you can discover how different they really are and why that's so important. We can't go through every plant and animal cell, obviously, but we can give you some great examples. Let's start with plant cells. Plant cells can have all kinds of specialization, depending on their function. I mean, you can just look at a cross-section of a leaf and see all kinds of specialization. At the top here, also often at the bottom of the cross-section too, you can have a waxy cuticle layer, a protective layer that covers plant epidermal cells. Plant epidermal cells, among their many functions, are important in forming a boundary from the outside. They help keep plants from losing precious water. And epidermal cells can be up here on the top of the leaf. That's the upper epidermis, and they can also be down here on the bottom, the lower epidermis. And depending on the type of plant and where it might be living, the layer could be just one cell thick or several cells thick, especially if the plant lives somewhere where it's going to have to protect against environment extremes. Many plant epidermal cells do not even contain chloroplasts because, for a lot of plants, that's not a main function for epidermal cells. Guard cells are specialized epidermal cells that have an important job of controlling the opening and closing of stomata, which are pores in the leaf. They tend to be at the bottom of the leaf, but as always, there are some exceptions. See, you want stomata to be open to let the exchange of gases through, but you don't want them to be open if you don't have enough water in the plant because water can get out. There's a balance. We have a video on that. Here are more specialized epidermal cells, trichomes. Now for plants, these can be plant hair cells, and maybe not like what you were thinking. These epidermal cells can be hair-shaped, and they have all kinds of different functions. Some of them are protective and can secrete toxic substances to protect against insects that might want to eat them. Some act like light reflectors to help protect plants that live in really hot areas that get a lot of direct sunlight. Now, a side note on trichomes, my favorite plant of all time is the sundew. It's a carnivorous plant that I actually used to grow like crazy when I was a kid until it got a little too crazy, but I digress. Anyway, this plant actually has trichome cells that produce enzymes that digest insects because it's a carnivorous plant. Yep. Still in this leaf cross-section, look at this layer. This is the mesophyll. Here are the palisade mesophyll cells. These cells are really important for capturing light, so they're specialized for this task. Guess what they have a lot of? Chloroplast. Lots of chloroplast, making glucose from the sun, food for the plant. Underneath it, take a look at these spongy mesophyll cells. These cells that make up this area are pretty loosely packed. They have irregular shapes. They can have chloroplasts, but in many plants, they may not have as many chloroplasts as the palisade mesophyll cells because in many plants, the spongy mesophyll cells don't do as much photosynthesis as the palisade mesophyll cells do. Their irregular shape, combined with loose organization, gives space for gas exchange, which you need for photosynthesis. This vein here contains the xylem and the phloem. We talk about these vessels in another clip, but the cells that make up these vessels are specialized for transporting water in the xylem or products from photosynthesis in the phloem. Okay, so we just saw a few examples of specialized plant cells. Let's take a look at specialized animal cells. How about the animal cells in your human body? Let's take red blood cells, RBCs, erythrocytes, so many names. They contain hemoglobin in their cytoplasm, which is a protein that helps them carry oxygen. They have a disc shape, which maximizes surface area for carrying oxygen. And they are also fairly flexible, which is helpful when squeezing through small capillaries. Here's a fun fact. When they are mature, they actually don't have a nucleus, or a lot of other organelles. Again, it's all about maximizing that space for carrying oxygen. By just the name, you might hear white blood cells and think that they are very similar to red blood cells, just a different color. But in reality, they are extremely different in structure and function. There are many different kinds of white blood cells. Some of them are classified as granulocytes, which means a special part of their structure is that they have these granules in their cytoplasm, which when released can aid in destroying pathogens. Many white blood cell types can have an irregular shape with a structure that allows them to engulf foreign particles. How about muscle cells? Many muscle cells can have more mitochondria than many other body cell types because of their need for ATP energy. Now, depending on how their overlapping filaments are arranged, they can be considered striated, which basically means a striped appearance, or not striated. Their shape differs too. Smooth muscle has a shape that kind of tapers at each end, often described as a spindle shape. Skeletal muscle cells are long and cylinder-shaped and often bundled. They can have a lot of nuclei too, which is definitely interesting. If you're curious about why, it has to do with the fact that these cells develop from myoblasts, which have fused together, so to the Google to find out more. Now, cardiac muscle cells have many similarities to skeletal muscle, but because they have such an important function with the beating of the heart, they have to be in sync. They have what are called intercalated discs, and those join them and help carry the signal to maintain the heartbeat. Cardiac muscle cells are often branched, and they too can have more than one nucleus. Well, with our limited time, we want to mention one more specialized animal cell: neurons. Oh boy, where do we begin? Neurons are the cells that can sense a stimulus and transmit signals. Common places to find them include your brain or your spinal cord. These things can be over 1 meter long in humans. 1 meter. Microscopic still, but wow, just look at this beautiful cell. Its structure is specialized for signal conduction. In the neuron, structures called dendrites receive impulses, and axons transmit the impulse either to another neuron or to a cell that it's targeting, like one of the muscle cells we just mentioned. By the way, this transmitting of the signal, which can occur in an event called the action potential, it's going to have to be in another video. The action potential is just a beautiful, amazing process, and these cells are specialized for it. Whew, okay, that's a lot of specialized plant and animal cells. And that's just a few selected examples. One thing to keep in mind is that these specialized cells, they can make up specialized tissues in both plants and animals, and they function together. Now, more about tissues in our biological levels of organization video.
Cell modifications. Cells in the human body number in trillions and come in all shapes and sizes. These tiny structures are the basic unit of living organisms. Cells comprise tissues, tissues comprise organs, organs from organ systems, and organ systems work together in an organism. There are hundreds of different types of cells in the body, and the structure of a cell is perfectly suited for the role it performs. Cells of the digestive system, for instance, are different in structure and function from cells of the skeletal system. Regardless of the differences, cells of the body depend on one another, either directly or indirectly, to keep the body functioning as one unit.